The wind carried the smell of rain that evening, the kind that never came soon enough to wash away the sins of a dying town. Dry Creek sat quiet under a blood-orange sky, its streets lined with shuttered windows and tired souls who'd seen too many burials and not enough miracles. On the very edge of town, by the last hitching post before the open desert stretched into forever, Eli Carter tightened the saddle on his bay mare. His hat cast a long shadow over a face carved from years of dust and regret. Every line around his eyes told a story he didn't care to repeat. Not tonight. Not when time was running out. A soft voice broke the silence from behind him. "Eli, you ride out there now. You'll die out there." He turned. Clara Jennings stood in the doorway of the old mission house, her apron still damp from washing bandages. The lantern light behind her turned her hair to gold, but her eyes were tired, far too young to look that old. Eli pulled on his gloves, his movements slow and steady, deliberate. "You said he was still breathing. That's all I needed to hear." Clara stepped forward, her voice trembling, caught somewhere between fear and love. "You can't save him, Eli. You couldn't save him then, and you sure can't save him now." He met her gaze, a look that carried 10 years of heavy silence between two people who once meant everything to each other. "I owe him," Eli said, his voice low and gravelly. "And a man's debt doesn't just disappear because it hurts." Thunder cracked somewhere over the canyon, a hollow echo rolling through the air like the growl of something alive and waiting. The story really began 3 days earlier. A rider had stumbled into Dry Creek half dead and bleeding. His name was Caleb Moore, a bounty hunter turned drunk, who was once Eli's closest friend, but now was more ghost than man. They hadn't spoken in 6 long years, not since the night everything burned, the ranch, their friendship, and the woman they both loved. Through cracked lips, Caleb had whispered, "They took him, Eli. Your brother. The Blackthorn gangs got him down in Red Mesa Canyon. They'll hang him by sunrise." And with those words, he'd passed out cold on the saloon floor. Eli didn't waste time with questions. He just saddled his mare and packed enough shells for a fight he knew he might not win. Now, standing beneath that bruised, purple sky, he thought of his younger brother, Noah, the boy who never stopped believing Eli was still the hero their father raised him to be. If the Blackthorn gang truly had him, there wouldn't be much time left. Clara reached for his arm, her hand feeling small against the rough leather of his coat. "You can't keep paying for everyone else's sins, Eli. Not your brother's, not Caleb's, and not mine." He looked down at her hand, a brief, silent acknowledgement. "Maybe not, but I can try to keep one promise before this world finally buries me." The wind kicked up, sending dust swirling through the street, rattling a loose sign that read, "Dry Creek Mercantile." Somewhere in the distance a church bell tolled, though no one was there to ring it. Eli swung himself up onto his horse, the saddle creaking under his weight. "Tell the doc to keep Caleb alive if he can. I'll bring Noah home. Or I won't come back." Clara's eyes shimmered with a mix of anger and sorrow. "If you go into that canyon, you'll never come back the same." He nodded once, a slow, final gesture. He touched the brim of his hat and turned the mare toward the open plains. Maybe that's the point. The night swallowed him whole as he rode away. The sky above split open with a flash of lightning, illuminating the jagged, monstrous outline of Red Mesa in the distance. A black scar against the horizon. Every hoofbeat against the hard-packed earth echoed like the ticking of a clock, counting down to something he knew he couldn't stop. Memories came in flashes, sharp and unwelcome. Noah as a boy, laughing while they broke wild horses together. Caleb standing beside him on a ridge, both of them swearing they'd never turn on each other. And Clara. The night she walked away without ever looking back. Regret was a heavy thing to carry across miles of empty desert. By the time he reached the canyon rim, the rain had finally begun, cold needles of water cutting through the dust and the pale moonlight. Below him, faint campfires flickered among the rocks like the watchful eyes of a waiting beast. Eli dismounted, tying his mare to a twisted juniper tree, and checked his rifle. The sound of distant laughter drifted up from the canyon floor, harsh, drunken, and cruel. He crept to the edge and knelt, peering into the gloom. He spotted them. 4 men huddled around a fire and a 5th figure tied to a post. Even through the storm and the deep shadows, Eli knew that shape. Noah. A rush of breath escaped his chest, half relief, half pure terror. His brother was still alive. But for how long? As he began to creep down the narrow, treacherous slope, his boot slipped on a loose rock, sending a small cascade of gravel tumbling into the darkness below. One of the men by the fire instantly looked up, his head snapping in Eli's direction. Eli froze. Then, from somewhere right behind him, a whisper cut through the sound of the rain. "Didn't expect to see you again, Carter." He spun around, rifle raised in an instant. And there stood Caleb, pale, hollow-eyed, leaning on a rock for balance with fresh blood seeping through his bandages. "I told you to stay put," Eli hissed, his voice a low growl. Caleb managed a thin, grim smile. "And missed the chance to die in the same canyon we both ruined our lives over?" Before Eli could answer, a voice echoed up from below. It was deep, mocking, and chillingly familiar. "Well, well. Looks like the Carter boys finally found their way home." Lightning split the sky again, and in that blinding flash, Eli saw him. Silas Blackthorne, the outlaw who'd taken everything from them. Eli's grip tightened on his rifle. His breath came slow and steady, his focus narrowing. And then Clara's words echoed in his mind. "You can save him." He whispered back into the storm, a promise to himself, "Watch me." And with that, he stepped out from the cover of the rocks, straight into the firelight. Thank you so much for joining us on this ride. If you're as hooked as I am and need to know what happens next, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss part 2. We'll see you in the next one. The rain poured harder now, washing the canyon walls into streaks of rust and shadow. I stood at the rim of the mesa, my rifle steady, staring down into the warm glow of the outlaw fire below. My heart was a hammer in my chest, but my voice, when it finally came, was as calm as the grave. "Let him go, Silas." Every man at that campfire froze. The only sounds were the crackle of the flame and the rumble of distant thunder, filling the silence like the breath before a gunshot. Then Silas Blackthorne stood up. His long coat was dripping with rain, and a wicked grin was carved deep into his scarred face. "Well, hell," Silas drawled. "If it ain't the Carter boy, come to make himself a ghost." Down by the fire, my brother Noah stirred weakly against the post he was tied to, blood running down his temple. "Eli, don't." But I had already stepped into the open. Rainwater ran down my hat brim as I leveled my rifle. "I'm not here to talk." Silas just laughed, a low, rattling sound that cut right through the storm. "You never were. But talkin' ain't what I came for either." In a flash, his outlaws drew their guns. But I fired first. The crack of my Winchester split the storm. One man dropped instantly. Another stumbled back, clutching his shoulder. Before I could chamber another round, a second shot roared into the night from behind me. It was Caleb. It was chaos. Thunder and gunfire mixed into a deafening roar as shadows danced on the canyon walls like devils. I dove behind a massive boulder, frantically reloading. "Caleb, flank left," I yelled. But Caleb didn't move. When I turned, I saw him. Standing stock still, his pistol smoking, his eyes fixed on something else entirely. Silas had his revolver pressed against Noah's head. "You put that gun down, Carter," Silas called out, his voice as calm and cold as steel. "Or your little brother paints these rocks red." My hands began to tremble. For a moment, the world went completely quiet. All I could hear was the hiss of the rain and a faint sob from Noah's cracked lips. Then Caleb stepped forward. "Silas," he rasped, his voice tight. "You said you'd let the boy go." Silas smiled that awful smile. "I said I'd think about it. Didn't say which boy." Those words hit me like a bullet. My breath caught in my throat as the terrible realization dawned on me. Caleb. He'd been the one who led Silas right to Noah. "Tell me it ain't true," I said, my voice low, broken. "You brought him here?" Caleb's eyes were glassy with guilt. "I didn't mean for it to go this way. They said they'd kill me if what?" I cut him off, the anger rising. "If you sold out my blood?" The rain fell harder, washing the mud and blood together under our feet. Caleb's lips trembled. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could bring him in and we'd all just walk away. I barked out a laugh that sounded more like a cry of pain. "Walk away? You already did that once." Silas shoved Noah closer to the cliff's edge. "Enough talking. Drop the gun, Carter, or I'll finish what your daddy started." I froze. "What did you say?" Silas's grin widened, his eyes burning with a dark fire. "Didn't your ma ever tell you the truth? Your old man and me, we rode together once, long before you were even born. He left me for dead in this very canyon." The words felt like gravel in my chest. My father was no outlaw. Silas's smile stretched even wider. "No, but he was no saint neither. You think you're saving your brother? You're just following your father's trail, straight into hell." For a single heartbeat, time stood still. Then, in the bright flash of lightning, Caleb lunged. He hit Silas square in the ribs, sending both of them crashing into the mud. A gun went off, its echo thundering through the canyon. Noah fell backward, the rope still around his wrists, blood seeping through his shirt. I dropped my rifle and ran. "Noah!" But Silas was already on his feet, his face twisted in pure fury. He swung the revolver toward me, his finger tightening on the trigger, until Caleb grabbed his arm. The gun went off one more time. This time, Silas staggered back. A hole bloomed red through his chest. He looked down, shocked, then back at Caleb, and managed a smile through his blood-stained teeth. "Always knew. You'd pick the wrong side," he rasped before collapsing into the mud. Caleb stood frozen, rain dripping from his hat brim. The gun slipped from his hand. I caught Noah as he fell, pulling my brother close. "Stay with me, kid. You hear me? Stay with me." Noah's lips moved weakly. "You came for me. I knew you would." I pressed my forehead to his. "Don't talk. We're going home." Behind me, Caleb dropped to his knees, coughing hard, his voice ragged. "Eli, I didn't mean to." I turned, rage and sorrow at war in my eyes. "You betrayed us." Caleb nodded, his tears lost in the downpour. "I know. That's why I'm staying." "What?" Caleb's gaze drifted to the canyon ridge where more lanterns were flickering in the distance. More riders coming down the trail. Silas wasn't alone. He picked up his gun, chambered the last bullet, and gave me a tired, broken smile. "Get your brother out of here." I hesitated. "You'll die." "Maybe, but maybe that's what I owe you." For a moment I wanted to argue, to grab him, to drag him away from that edge. But the sound of hoofbeats was growing louder, closer. I looked down at Noah, limp in my arms, then back at Caleb. And in that moment, I understood. I squeezed his shoulder once, hard. "You do this. You do it clean." Caleb nodded. "Ain't no other way." I lifted Noah onto my horse and turned toward the heart of the storm. As I rode into the darkness, a single gunshot echoed through the canyon. Then only silence. The rain began to ease, turning soft and cold. I didn't look back. The rain had stopped sometime before dawn, but the desert held its breath. It was a silence born from too much death, too much fighting. I rode slow, the mud sucking at my horse's hooves. My brother, Noah, was slumped against me, a dead weight of dust, blood, and shared loss. The horizon was just beginning to blush pink over the distant mesas, and the air smelled sharp and clean with wet sage. Every step the horse took felt heavier than the last, each one a hammer blow against the quiet. By the time the sun was a thin, red line over the ridge, we'd reached the edge of Dry Creek. I slid from the saddle, my legs weak, and half-carried Noah through the door of the mission house. Clara was there, just as I knew she'd be. Her hair was still damp from sleep, but her eyes were wide, taking in the state of us. "Oh, Lord," she whispered, her voice catching as she rushed to help. "Eli, what happened?" I laid Noah down on the cot, trying to be gentle. My own voice came out low and broken, a stranger's voice. "He's alive. That's all that matters right now." Clara's hands trembled as she started to clean his wounds, her touch surprisingly steady. After a moment, she paused her work. "And Caleb?" she asked, her gaze finding mine. I couldn't bring myself to answer. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy, telling her everything words couldn't. She bowed her head, her voice barely a whisper. Then he found what he was looking for. I had to turn away, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. "He found peace," I finally managed to say. "Don't know if I ever will." The hours crawled by. Outside, the storm clouds finally broke apart, and golden sunlight spilled across the valley, touching everything it landed on. The church bell, the weathered fences, the fields that had thirsted for rain for far too long. It was then that Noah stirred. He was weak, but a faint smile touched his lips. "You brought me home," he murmured. I knelt beside him, my own exhaustion a physical weight. Wasn't easy. He tried to laugh, a dry, rattling sound. "You always were stubborn." A ghost of a smile crossed my face. Guess I get that from Ma. His own smile faded. "What about Caleb?" he asked, his voice fragile. I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "He bought us time. That's what counts." Noah closed his eyes and I saw fresh tears trace clean paths through the dirt on his cheeks. "He used to tell me you two were brothers once." My throat tightened. "We were," I said, my voice quiet. "We just forgot what that meant for a while." A new wind was picking up outside, rattling the shutters of the mission house. I stood up and stepped out onto the porch, needing air. The town was slowly waking up. A few wagons were moving down the main street. A dog was barking somewhere in the distance. It felt like another world, completely separate from the canyon I'd left just last night. I could still hear it if I listened hard enough. The echo of that final gunshot, bouncing off the canyon walls, replaying itself over and over in my mind. I'd always believed redemption was something a man had to earn, something you paid for with penance and pain. But standing there, watching the town come to life, I wasn't so sure anymore. Maybe redemption wasn't something you earned at all. Maybe it was a gift, something someone gives you when they choose to die in your place. That evening, Clara found me by the corral. I was mending a piece of rope, working it over and over in my hands as if the fate of the world depended on it. The setting sun painted my face in shades of orange and red. "You can't blame yourself forever," she said softly, coming to stand beside me. I just stared at the rope. "Blaming myself's the only thing I ever been good at." She sat down on the dusty rail next to me. "You did save him. You saved your brother." I shook my head, the motion slow and tired. "Caleb saved him. I just rode too late." She placed a gentle hand on my arm. "Maybe, but you still rode. That's more than most men would have done." I looked at her then, really looked at her. I saw the deep weariness in her eyes, but also a quiet strength that seemed unshakable, a constant in a world where everything else had fallen apart. "I ain't the same man that left this town," I said, the words feeling truer than anything I'd said in years. "I know," she replied simply. "Maybe that's what you needed." We sat there in silence for a while, the wind moving soft and cool through the dry grass. Finally, she asked, "What'll you do now?" I watched the last sliver of sun disappear below the hills. Bury the dead. Start over, maybe. Clara gave me a sad, knowing smile. "You'll never outrun the past, Eli." I nodded, accepting it. I ain't trying to, just hoping I can walk beside it without falling down again. The next morning, I rode out alone. I headed back toward Red Mesa Canyon, the air still cool and the whole world smelling fresh and clean after the rain. When I reached the place where the fight had ended, I found what I was looking for. Someone had built a small pile of rocks over Caleb. Maybe it was travelers passing through, or maybe just the wind and time. I dismounted, my boots sinking into the damp earth, and knelt. I pulled a single iron bullet from my pocket and set it carefully on the stones. "I ain't forgiven you," I said quietly to the empty air, "but I'm thankful just the same." I stood and looked out over the vast expanse of the canyon. This was the same land my father had once ridden, a place where men fought, bled, and lost everything chasing a kind of justice they could never quite hold on to. For the first time in more years than I could count, I took off my hat and bowed my head. "Reckon you were right, Clara," I whispered to the wind. "I couldn't save him, but maybe he saved me." The breeze seemed to catch the words and carry them away into the red cliffs. And for just a single heartbeat, I swore I could hear Caleb's laugh echoing faintly on the wind, the sound of youth, of dust and dreams long since gone. I stood, gathered the reins of my mare, and turned her toward the open plains. The sky was turning a brilliant gold, the new light breaking clean over the mesa. This time, I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because in the end, I realized some rides aren't about saving anyone. They're about finding the part of yourself you lost along the way. I rode into the sunrise, the canyon and its ghosts fading behind me. The storm was gone. The world was quiet again. And for the first time in a long, long while, the silence didn't hurt. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this story moved you, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more tales from the frontier. Your support means the world. Ride safe out there.